The pipe wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered onto the concrete floor of our basement at exactly 2:17 a.m. I know the time because that's when Amelia's car pulled into our driveway, headlights sweeping across the small basement window like a searchlight hunting for secrets. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I'm Ben Carter, 42 years old, and I've been fixing things my whole life. Houses, plumbing, electrical work, broken marriages, though apparently I'm not as good at that last one as I thought. My wife Amelia was supposed to be back from her girls' weekend in Portland tomorrow afternoon. Yet here she was, creeping up our front steps at 2 a.m, trying to be quiet and failing miserably. The woman could wake the dead opening a bag of chips. I wiped my hands on an old rag and climbed the basement stairs. Our 1920s house creaks like a ship in a storm, so stealth wasn't an option. By the time I reached the kitchen, she was already there, looking guilty as hell. "Ben, you scared me." She clutched her chest dramatically, her yoga-toned body silhouetted against the refrigerator light. Even at 2 a.m. she looked perfect, blonde hair in a messy bun that probably took 20 minutes to achieve, designer workout clothes that cost more than most people's rent. "Early night?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. The retreat ended early. Lila got food poisoning. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Why are you up?" "The hot water heater's acting up again. Figured I'd fix it before it floods the basement." I gestured toward the stairs. "How was the spiritual awakening?" Amelia owned Castle Falls' most successful fitness studio, a sleek glass and chrome temple where wealthy housewives paid premium prices to pretend they were athletes. She'd built it from nothing over the past 5 years, and I was proud of her success. At least, I used to be. It was enlightening. She set down a gym bag I'd never seen before, expensive leather, definitely not her usual style. "I need to tell you something, Ben. About us." Here it comes, I thought. The conversation I'd been dreading for months. The late nights, the mysterious phone calls, the way she looked at me like I was a piece of furniture she was considering replacing. "I've been thinking about our marriage," she continued, her voice taking on that carefully modulated tone she used with difficult clients. "We've gotten comfortable. Maybe too comfortable." I crossed my arms. "Comfortable is bad now?" "We're in a rut, Ben. When's the last time we did anything exciting, spontaneous?" She moved closer, and I caught a whiff of expensive cologne, not mine. "I think we should open up our marriage. Explore other connections while staying committed to each other." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the gut, but I kept my expression neutral. 20 years of marriage had taught me to read between the lines. This wasn't a suggestion, it was a confession. "Open it up how?" I asked. "See other people. No secrets, no lies. Just freedom to grow." Her eyes were bright with the fervor of someone who'd already made up her mind. "Life's short, Ben. We're both still young. Why shouldn't we experience everything it has to offer?" I stared at her for a long moment, processing this surreal conversation. My wife of 2 decades was asking permission to cheat on me, or more likely, asking for retroactive forgiveness. "You've already met someone," I said. It wasn't a question. She had the grace to look embarrassed. "There's this investor interested in expanding the studio. Chad Foster. He's dynamic, successful. He makes me feel alive again." Chad Foster. I filed the name away for future reference. "How long?" I asked. "It's not about time, Ben. It's about connection, chemistry, things that can't be measured or scheduled." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "You could find that too. There are dating apps, websites. You might discover parts of yourself you never knew existed." The audacity was breathtaking. She was asking me to facilitate her affair while finding my own distraction to keep me busy. It was like asking someone to help you rob their own house. And if I say no? Her mask slipped for just a second, revealing something cold underneath. Then we'll have to consider whether this marriage is working for either of us. There it was, the threat wrapped in therapeutic language. Agree to this insanity or face divorce. She'd probably already consulted a lawyer, figured out how to maximize her settlement while minimizing the damage to her pristine reputation. But Amelia had made one crucial mistake. She assumed I was the same pushover she'd married 20 years ago, the guy who'd let her make all the decisions while I focused on work and home repairs. She didn't know that I'd been watching, listening, and learning. Okay, I said quietly. She blinked, clearly expecting more resistance. Okay? You want an open marriage? Fine. But we do this properly. New rules, new arrangements. If we're going to be roommates instead of spouses, we split everything 50-50. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, everything. Ben, that's not... And if you're bringing other men into our house, you pay extra for cleaning and wear and tear. Call it a hosting fee. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. After all, you're running a business now. Might as well treat it like one. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You're being ridiculous. Am I? You want freedom, Amelia. Freedom comes with responsibility and consequences. I turned and headed back toward the basement, leaving her standing in our kitchen with her mouth hanging open. As I descended the stairs, I heard her mutter something about me being impossible to reason with. But I wasn't being unreasonable. I was being strategic. Because while she'd been planning her grand betrayal, I'd been doing some investigating of my own. The mysterious phone calls, the unexplained charges on our credit card, the way she'd suddenly become interested in business trips and networking events. I knew about Chad Foster before she'd ever spoken his name. I knew he was 34, recently moved to Castle Falls from Boston, and had more money than sense. I knew he drove a silver BMW and lived in the new condos downtown. I knew he was engaged to a woman named Victoria Ashworth, whose father owned half the commercial real estate in New England. What I didn't know was how far Amelia was willing to go to keep her secret. But I was about to find out. I picked up my pipe wrench and got back to work. The hot water heater wasn't the only thing in this house that needed fixing. But unlike my marriage, at least the plumbing could be salvaged. 20 minutes later, I heard Amelia's footsteps on the floor above, then the sound of our bedroom door closing. I waited another 10 minutes before creeping back upstairs. Her purse sat on the kitchen counter where she'd left it. Inside, nestled between her wallet and keys, was a phone I'd never seen before, a cheap burner with a cracked screen. I powered it on and scrolled through the messages. What I found there made my blood run cold, not with anger, but with determination. My wife thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. She was about to learn that I'd been playing a completely different game all along. The next morning, I woke up alone. Amelia had already left for the studio, probably to brief Chad on our conversation and plan their next move. She'd taken the burner phone with her, but not before I'd photographed every message, every photo, every piece of evidence that would come in handy later. I made coffee and sat at our kitchen table, staring out at the quiet street where we'd lived for 15 years. Mrs. Granger was already in her front yard, watering flowers that didn't need watering, her daily reconnaissance mission disguised as gardening. She waved when she saw me, and I waved back. In a town like Castle Falls, information was currency, and Mrs. Granger was the Federal Reserve. My phone buzzed. Doug Martinez, my business partner, and the closest thing I had to a best friend. "You sound like hell," he said when I answered. "Rough night. Can you handle the Morrison job today? I need to take care of some personal business." Doug had worked construction with me for 8 years. He was built like a linebacker, had hands the size of dinner plates, and could spot trouble from a mile away. "Everything okay with you and Amelia?" Define okay. That bad, huh? Want to talk about it? Not over the phone. Meet me at the Crooked Nail tonight, 7 o'clock. The Crooked Nail was Castle Falls' unofficial town hall. A dim, wood-paneled bar where everyone knew your business before you did. If I was going to start gathering intelligence, it was the perfect place to begin. After hanging up, I drove to the public library. It sounds pathetic, but I needed to research divorce law and private investigation techniques without leaving a digital trail on our home computer. Amelia was smart, but she wasn't paranoid. Yet. The librarian, a sweet woman named Carol who'd helped me with research projects for years, set me up at a computer in the back corner. "Working on a new renovation project, Ben?" "Something like that," I said. "Thanks, Carol." I spent 3 hours learning about Maine's divorce laws, asset division, and the legal definition of adultery. Then I researched Chad Foster. The man had quite a digital footprint. LinkedIn profile boasting about his disruptive approach to fitness industry investment. Facebook photos of him at charity galas and yacht parties. A mention in Boston Business Journal about his engagement to Victoria Ashworth, complete with a photo of them at some society function. Victoria was beautiful in that old money way, elegant, refined, probably never had to work a day in her life. She looked genuinely happy in the photos, gazing at Chad like he was her Prince Charming. I felt sorry for her. She had no idea what kind of man she was planning to marry. I dug deeper, following links and cross-references. Chad's business history was interesting. Lots of failed ventures, each one funded by a different investor who'd eventually cut ties. He had a pattern of moving to new cities when his welcome wore out, reinventing himself with each fresh start. Castle Falls was just his latest hunting ground. By the time I left the library, I had a comprehensive dossier on my wife's lover. More importantly, I had a plan. I spent the afternoon at Home Depot, buying supplies for a project Amelia knew nothing about. Security cameras, motion sensors, digital recorders, all disguised as routine maintenance purchases. If she wanted to turn our house into a love nest, I was going to document every moment. That evening, I arrived at the Crooked Nail to find Doug already there, nursing a beer and chatting with Tommy the bartender. The place was busy for a Tuesday. Construction workers, shop owners, and retirees who had nowhere else to be. "You look terrible," Doug said as I slid into the booth across from him. "Thanks. You always know just what to say." Tommy brought me a beer without being asked. "Heard Amelia's expanding the studio again. Business must be good." I took a long drink before answering. "Business is booming. She's got investors lining up around the block." Doug raised an eyebrow. He knew me well enough to hear the edge in my voice. We made small talk until the crowd thinned out. Then I told him everything. The late-night conversation, the open marriage proposal, what I'd found on the burner phone. Doug listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. "Jesus, Ben, I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be useful. I need your help. Whatever you need." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Chad Foster drives a silver BMW, license plate Victor Charlie 7492. I want to know everywhere he goes, everyone he talks to, everything he does. Can you handle that?" Doug grinned. "You want him followed?" "Discreetly, and I want to know about his business dealings. Who's he meeting with? What kind of investments is he really making? Something doesn't add up about this guy. I've got a cousin who works at the bank. And my brother-in-law does repo work. He knows every car in town." Doug finished his beer. "What are you planning, Ben?" "I'm going to give my wife exactly what she asked for, an open marriage, complete with new rules and full transparency." I smiled, and this time it was genuine. "She wants excitement? I'm going to show her what excitement really looks like." We shook hands, and Doug left. I stayed for one more beer, listening to the conversations around me. Small towns were like echo chambers. Secrets had a way of bouncing around until everyone heard them. Mrs. Patterson from the flower shop was complaining about her husband's golf obsession. Mike Sullivan was bragging about his son's college scholarship. And in the corner booth, 2 women I didn't recognize were gossiping about some scandal at the country club. "She thinks nobody knows," one of them was saying. "But Jennifer saw them together at that new place downtown in broad daylight." Some people have no shame, her friend replied. What about her husband? Poor man doesn't have a clue. Someone should tell him. I finished my beer and headed home, their words echoing in my head. Someone should tell him. In about a week, everyone in Castle Falls would know exactly what kind of woman Amelia Carter really was. But first, I had some preparations to make. The next few days fell into a strange routine. Amelia would leave early for the studio, claiming she had business meetings and investor consultations. I would work on my various construction projects while secretly installing my surveillance equipment throughout the house. She came home Wednesday night with takeout from that expensive Thai place downtown, the kind of gesture that used to mean she was feeling guilty about something. We ate in relative silence, making small talk about work and weather, while carefully avoiding the elephant in the room. I've been thinking about what we discussed, she said finally, picking at her pad thai. Our new arrangement? The financial part seems harsh. She looked up at me with those blue eyes that had first attracted me 20 years ago. We're still married, Ben. We're still partners. Are we? I set down my fork. Because partners usually discuss major decisions before making them. Partners don't keep burner phones hidden in their purses. Her face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. I stood up and started clearing the table. The rent is due Friday, by the way. Your half of the mortgage, utilities, and household expenses comes to $1,200. I'll take cash or check. This is insane, Ben. You're treating me like a stranger. You are a stranger. The woman I married wouldn't have asked permission to cheat on me. I rinsed the dishes and loaded them into the dishwasher. But hey, at least you asked. That's something. She stormed out of the kitchen and I heard her bedroom door slam. Yes, her bedroom. She'd been sleeping in the guest room since our conversation, claiming she needed space to process. Fine by me. It made installing the cameras easier. Thursday morning brought the first real test of my new surveillance system. Amelia left for work at 7:30, same as always. But at 9:15, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the living room camera. She was back, and she wasn't alone. I watched from my truck parked 2 blocks away as Chad Foster's silver BMW pulled into my driveway. He was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, athletic, with the kind of artificial confidence that came from never facing real consequences. He wore a suit that probably cost more than I made in a week and moved like he owned the world. They were inside for 47 minutes. I know because I timed it while watching the live feed on my phone. They didn't waste time with small talk. When they finally emerged, both looking satisfied and disheveled, I had everything I needed. High-definition video, crystal-clear audio, timestamps, and metadata. Enough evidence to destroy both their reputations and his engagement. But I wasn't ready to play that card yet. I was still gathering intelligence, building a case that would be impossible to deny or spin. That afternoon, Doug called with his first report. Your boy Chad's been busy, he said. My cousin at the bank says he's been asking about commercial loans for some big expansion project. Wants to borrow against property he doesn't actually own yet. What kind of property? That's the interesting part. He's been sniffing around the old Brennan warehouse on Industrial Street. You know, the one that's been empty for 5 years? Apparently, he thinks he can turn it into some kind of fitness complex. I knew the building well. I'd done some renovation estimates for potential buyers over the years. It was a money pit, with structural issues that would cost hundreds of thousands to fix. Anyone with construction experience would run screaming from that project. He's either an idiot, or he's planning to use someone else's money, I said. Both, probably. My brother-in-law says the BMW is leased, not owned. And get this, the address on the registration is his fiancé's place in Boston, not his apartment here. Interesting. Chad was living a double life, using his engagement as collateral while playing house with my wife. The man was either incredibly stupid or incredibly arrogant. Maybe both. Keep digging, I told Doug. I want to know everything about his finances, his business history, and his relationship with the fiancée. You got it, But Ben, what's the end game here? You can't just collect information forever. He was right. I needed a plan that would accomplish 3 goals: expose Amelia's betrayal, destroy Chad's credibility, and do it all in a way that left me looking like the victim instead of the villain. In a small town like Castle Falls, reputation was everything. People might forgive a lot of things, but they never forgot who the good guys and bad guys were in any story. I needed to make sure I was wearing the white hat when the dust settled. Friday evening, Amelia made her first payment, $1,200 in cash, counted out on the kitchen counter with obvious resentment. "This is temporary," she said. "Once you come to your senses, we'll go back to normal." "Normal ended Tuesday night," I replied, pocketing the money. "This is our new reality. You wanted freedom? Congratulations. Freedom isn't free." She glared at me, but didn't argue further. She was learning that I wasn't the same pushover who'd spent 20 years avoiding confrontation. That man was gone, replaced by someone who understood that sometimes you had to fight fire with fire. Saturday morning, I got an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Granger knocked on my door at 8 a.m. sharp, holding a plate of homemade cookies and wearing her most innocent expression. "Good morning, Ben. I thought you might enjoy some chocolate chip cookies. They're your favorite, aren't they?" Mrs. Granger made terrible cookies, but she was the neighborhood's unofficial intelligence network. If she was here with baked goods, she had information to trade. "That's very thoughtful, Mrs. Granger. Would you like some coffee?" We sat at my kitchen table, and she got straight to the point. "I couldn't help but notice you've had some visitors lately." She took a delicate sip of coffee. "That young man with the fancy car. He's been here several times when Amelia's supposed to be at work." "Is that so?" "I'm not one to gossip, you understand. But I worry about you, Ben. You're such a good man, and sometimes good men are the last to see what's right in front of them." I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. Mrs. Granger had been watching my house like a hawk for years, documenting every visitor and unusual activity. She probably knew more about my marriage than I did. "What have you seen exactly?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook, the kind detectives used in old movies. "I keep track of things, for safety purposes, you understand. Never know when the police might need witness testimony." She flipped through pages of meticulous notes, complete with dates, times, and descriptions. Chad's visits, Amelia's unusual schedule, even the delivery trucks that had brought my surveillance equipment. "This is very thorough," I said. "I was a secretary for 40 years, dear. Organization is a habit." She closed the notebook and looked at me seriously. "I don't know what you're planning, Ben, but I want you to know that some of us are paying attention. If you need someone to verify what's been happening here, you just let me know." After she left, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, thinking about what she'd said. I wasn't alone in this. Other people had noticed Amelia's behavior, Chad's presence, the changes in our routine. When the time came to tell my story, I'd have credible witnesses to back me up. But first, I needed to accelerate the timeline. Waiting for them to make mistakes was taking too long. It was time to force their hand. That evening, I created a profile on 3 different dating apps. By Sunday morning, my phone was buzzing constantly with notifications from the dating apps. Apparently, 42-year-old contractors who owned their own homes were in high demand in the Castle Falls area. I'd received over 100 messages in less than 24 hours, Amelia noticed immediately. "Your phone's been going off all morning," she said over breakfast, trying to sound casual. "Everything okay?" "Just work stuff," I lied, watching her face carefully. "You know how it is." But she knew it wasn't work. The notifications kept coming throughout the day, and each ping made her a little more agitated. By evening, she couldn't stand it anymore. "Are you going to answer that?" she snapped when another message arrived during dinner. I picked up my phone and smiled at the screen. "Oh, this isn't work. It's my dating profile, remember? You said I should explore other connections." The color drained from her face. "You're..." Dating? Not yet, but I'm getting a lot of interest. Apparently, honest men who know how to fix things are pretty rare these days. I scrolled through the messages, making sure she could see the photos of attractive women who'd contacted me. This one's a nurse. This one teaches kindergarten. Oh, and this one owns a bakery downtown. Ben, I didn't mean you should actually… What? Did you think this was a one-way street? I set down my phone and looked at her directly. You wanted an open marriage. That means we're both free to see other people. Unless you'd prefer to go back to the old arrangement. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. She'd painted herself into a corner, and we both knew it. If she objected to my dating, she'd have to admit that her open marriage proposal was really just permission to cheat. I just think we should take things slowly, she said finally. You're right. We should be careful about who we let into our lives. I picked up my phone again. Speaking of which, how's your investor friend Chad, wasn't it? You haven't mentioned him lately. He's fine. The expansion project is moving forward. That's great. I'd love to meet him sometime. Maybe we could all have dinner together. You know, since we're being so open and honest about everything now. The suggestion clearly terrified her. I don't think that's necessary. Why not? If he's going to be spending time in our house, I should probably know who he is. Basic security, right? She made some excuse about his busy schedule and changed the subject, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was starting to realize that her perfect plan was developing some serious complications. Monday morning brought more complications, courtesy of Doug's investigation. I've got news about your boy Chad, he said when he called. Remember that fiancée in Boston? Victoria Ashworth? What about her? She's been asking questions. My cousin's girlfriend works at a hotel downtown, and she says this classy woman came in Saturday asking about a guest named Chad Foster. Wanted to know if he was registered there, how long he'd been staying, that kind of thing. My heart rate picked up. Did she find him? Nope. He's not staying at any hotels. But here's the kicker. She left her contact information and asked them to call if he showed up. Apparently, he's supposed to be in Portland on business, not Castle Falls. This was perfect. Chad was lying to his fiancée about his whereabouts, which meant he was vulnerable. If Victoria found out what he was really doing here, his engagement would be over, along with his access to the Ashworth family fortune. There's more, Doug continued. I did some digging into his business history. Guy's been running the same scam for years. Finds lonely women with successful businesses, promises to help them expand, then disappears with their money. He did it in Hartford, Providence, and Springfield before coming here. He's a con man. A good one. Always targets women who are emotionally vulnerable, makes them feel special and successful. By the time they realize what's happening, he's already moved on to the next mark. I felt a cold rage building in my chest. Amelia wasn't just cheating on me, she was being manipulated by a professional predator. Part of me wanted to warn her, to protect her from what was coming. But the rational part of my brain reminded me that she'd made her choice. She'd chosen excitement over stability, lies over truth. Now she'd have to live with the consequences. I need you to do something for me, I told Doug. Find out how to contact Victoria Ashworth, phone number, email, whatever you can get. You're going to tell her? Eventually, but first I want to gather more evidence. If I'm going to blow up Chad's life, I want to make sure the explosion is big enough to take out everything he's built here. That afternoon, I had an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. I drove to Amelia's studio during her busiest time, the post-work rush when all the professional women came in for their yoga classes and personal training sessions. The place was exactly what I'd expected, all glass and chrome, with motivational posters and expensive equipment. Amelia had built something impressive here, and I'd always been proud of her success. It made what I was about to do feel like a betrayal, but she'd betrayed me first. I walked up to the reception desk, where a young woman with perfect teeth and highlighted hair was checking in clients. Hi, I'm Ben Carter, Amelia's husband. Her face lit up with recognition. "Oh my gosh, Mr. Carter. I'm Jessica. I've heard so much about you. Amelia's always talking about how supportive you are of the business." I try to be. Actually, I was hoping to surprise her with something special. I know she's been working with an investor on the expansion project, Chad Foster. I thought maybe I could take them both out to dinner, celebrate the partnership. Jessica's expression shifted slightly. "Oh, I'm not sure about Mr. Foster's schedule. He's been very busy lately." "I bet he has. New town, new opportunities. Has he been around much?" "Well, he comes in for meetings with Amelia pretty regularly. Usually when it's quiet, you know. They like to discuss business without interruptions." I bet they do, I thought. That makes sense. They probably need privacy for all those financial discussions. Numbers, projections, that kind of thing. Exactly. Jessica seemed relieved that I understood. They've been working so hard on the plans. Sometimes they meet here after hours. Sometimes at that coffee shop downtown. Sometimes... She trailed off, realizing she might be saying too much. "Sometimes where?" "Oh, just different places. You know how business meetings are." She forced a bright smile. "Should I tell Amelia you stopped by?" "No, don't spoil the surprise. I'll catch up with her at home." I left the studio with exactly what I'd come for, confirmation that their relationship was an open secret among her staff. When this all came out, there would be plenty of witnesses to testify that Chad and Amelia had been spending unusual amounts of time together. That evening, I decided to test the waters with a more direct approach. "I've been thinking about your investor friend," I said while we were watching TV. "Chad Foster. What's his background?" Amelia tensed up immediately. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious. It's a big decision, expanding the business. I want to make sure you're working with someone reputable. He's very experienced. He's done fitness industry investments all over New England." "That's impressive. What's his company called?" She hesitated for just a moment too long. "Foster Investment Group." I made a mental note to have Doug research that name. I was willing to bet it didn't exist. "And he's local now? Moved here permanently?" "He's transitioning his operations to this area. Sees a lot of potential in the main market." More lies. Chad was hiding out in Castle Falls while lying to his fiancée about his whereabouts. He wasn't transitioning anything. He was running a con game on my wife while planning to disappear with her money. "Maybe I should meet him," I said casually. "Get a sense of what kind of man we're dealing with." "That's not necessary, Ben. This is my business. Our business. We're married, remember? Community property and all that." I turned to look at her directly. "Unless you don't want me to meet him for some other reason?" She couldn't answer that question without admitting something she wasn't ready to admit. So she made another excuse and went to bed early, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my plans. Tuesday morning, everything changed. I was reviewing the surveillance footage from the previous day when I spotted something that made my blood boil. Chad hadn't just been in my house, he'd been in my workshop, going through my tools and equipment. The man was either incredibly stupid or incredibly arrogant to think he could snoop around my property without consequences. But what really pushed me over the edge was what I saw next. He'd found the spare key to my truck and made a copy. The bastard was planning to use my own vehicle for God knows what purpose. That's when I decided it was time to move from passive surveillance to active measures. I called Doug and told him to meet me at the hardware store. It was time to send Chad Foster a message he wouldn't forget. Wednesday afternoon, while Amelia was at the studio and Chad was presumably somewhere planning his next move, I put my plan into action. Doug and I had spent the morning at the hardware store, gathering supplies for what I like to call aggressive home security measures. Chad's silver BMW was parked in the lot behind his downtown apartment building, gleaming in the afternoon sun like a trophy. The man clearly took pride in his possessions, which made what I was about to do even more satisfying. "You sure about this?" Doug asked as we approached the vehicle. He went through my workshop, copied my truck keys, and he's been screwing my wife in my house, I replied, pulling on latex gloves. I'm sure. We worked quickly and efficiently. First, I used a small drill to create tiny holes in the BMW's air conditioning vents, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Then I filled those holes with glitter, the fine craft kind that gets into everything and never comes out completely. Next came the sardine oil, just a few drops under each seat, in the door panels, and around the air intake. It would take a few days for the smell to really develop, especially with the weather getting warmer. Finally, the pièce de résistance, I removed the valve stems from his tires and replaced them with ones that had been modified to release air slowly. His tires would be flat by morning, but any mechanic would assume it was just bad luck with multiple punctures. The whole operation took less than 20 minutes. We cleaned up our tools, disposed of the evidence, and drove away without being seen. It wasn't vandalism exactly, more like aggressive interior decorating. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. Is this Ben Carter? The voice was female, educated, with a slight Boston accent. Who's asking? My name is Victoria Ashworth. I believe you know my fiancé, Chad Foster. My heart started pounding, but I kept my voice steady. I'm not sure I do. The name sounds familiar, but he's been spending time in your town, Castle Falls. I have reason to believe he's been conducting business there without telling me about it. This was it, the opportunity I'd been waiting for. But I had to be careful. Victoria was clearly suspicious, but I didn't know how much she actually knew. What kind of business? I asked. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Chad told me he was in Portland working on a hotel development project, but I've discovered he's actually been in Castle Falls for weeks, and I can't reach him at any of the numbers he gave me. That's strange. Have you tried calling the local hotels? Maybe he's registered under a different name for security reasons. I've tried everything. Mr. Carter, I'm going to be direct with you. I hired a private investigator, and your name came up in connection with Chad's activities. Something about a fitness studio investment? My wife's business. Of course, the private investigator would have found that connection. I had to think fast. Oh, right, Chad Foster. He's been talking to my wife about investing in her fitness studio. I've never actually met the man, but she's mentioned him. Your wife? Amelia. She owns Castle Falls Fitness. It's been very successful, and she's looking to expand. Chad approached her about being an investor. There was a long pause. Mr. Carter, I need to ask you something, and I hope you'll be honest with me. Has Chad been appropriate in his business dealings with your wife? The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Victoria suspected something, but she wasn't sure what. I could protect Chad and Amelia by lying, or I could plant seeds of doubt that would grow into something bigger. That's a very interesting question, Ms. Ashworth. Why do you ask? Chad has a history of getting overly involved with his female business partners. I've overlooked it in the past because I trusted him. But this situation feels different. Different how? He's been secretive about this project. Usually he tells me everything about his investments, but with this one, he's been evasive, and he's been gone for much longer than he originally said. I made a decision that would change everything. Ms. Ashworth, I think we should meet. There are some things about your fiancé's business practices that you should probably know. We arranged to meet the next afternoon at a coffee shop in the next town over, neutral ground where we wouldn't be seen by anyone from Castle Falls. I spent the rest of the evening preparing for what might be the most important conversation of this entire ordeal. Thursday morning brought the first sign that my message to Chad had been received. Amelia came down to breakfast looking agitated. Chad's having car trouble, she announced. Some kind of problem with his BMW. He might need to borrow our spare car for a few days. That's unfortunate, I said, not looking up from my newspaper. What kind of problem? Flat tires and something wrong with the air conditioning? He thinks someone might have vandalized it. Vandalized? That's serious. Has he reported it to the police? She hesitated. He doesn't want to make a big deal out of it. You know how these things go, probably just kids messing around. Probably. Still, he should be careful. Vandalism has a way of escalating if people don't take it seriously. The threat was subtle but clear. Chad would understand that his car troubles weren't random, and that more serious problems could follow if he didn't back off. But instead of backing down, Chad decided to escalate. That afternoon, while I was meeting with Victoria Ashworth, Chad Foster made the biggest mistake of his life. He came to my house, used his copied key to enter my workshop, and tried to find evidence that I was responsible for his car troubles. What he found instead were the surveillance cameras I'd installed throughout the property. Victoria Ashworth was exactly what I'd expected: elegant, intelligent, and completely unaware of what kind of man she was planning to marry. We met at a quiet cafe in Millfield, about 20 minutes from Castle Falls, and I told her everything. Well, almost everything. I showed her the photos Doug had taken of Chad's BMW in my driveway, the timestamps proving he'd been in Castle Falls when he was supposed to be in Portland, and the business registration record showing that Foster Investment Group didn't exist. He's a con man, I explained. He targets successful women, promises to help expand their businesses, and then disappears with their money. My wife is just his latest mark. Victoria studied the evidence with the cool professionalism of someone accustomed to dealing with complex financial matters. How long has this been going on? About 3 weeks, as far as I can tell. Maybe longer. And your wife? Does she know what he's really doing? That was the question I'd been dreading. Because the truth was, I wasn't entirely sure. Amelia might be a willing participant in Chad's scheme, or she might be another victim. Either way, she'd betrayed our marriage. But the degree of her culpability was still unclear. I think she believes he's legitimate, I said carefully. Chad is very convincing. He's told her exactly what she wanted to hear about expanding the business. Victoria nodded slowly. That's his pattern. He makes women feel special, successful, like they're partners in something bigger than themselves. By the time they realize what's happening, he's already moved on. What are you going to do? I'm going to confront him, tonight, and I'm going to make sure he understands that his little game is over. We exchanged contact information, and I drove back to Castle Falls, feeling like I'd just lit a very long fuse on a very large bomb. Victoria Ashworth wasn't the kind of woman who would handle betrayal quietly. When she confronted Chad, the explosion would be visible from space. I arrived home to find my workshop door standing open, and Chad Foster's BMW parked in my driveway. Apparently, he'd gotten his tires fixed faster than expected. The man was inside my house, probably searching for evidence or trying to intimidate me. Big mistake. I parked down the street and called Doug. Remember what we talked about? It's time. On my way. Then I called the police non-emergency line and reported a break-in at my address. I didn't want Chad arrested. Not yet. But I wanted official documentation that he'd been on my property without permission. Finally, I called Victoria Ashworth. Your fiancé is at my house right now, I told her. If you want to catch him in the act, you should get here as soon as possible. 20 minutes later, Castle Falls witnessed the kind of public confrontation that people would be talking about for years. By the time Victoria Ashworth's black Mercedes pulled into my driveway, half the neighborhood was watching from their windows. Doug had arrived 5 minutes earlier and was waiting in his truck, ready to provide backup if things got physical. Officer Kelly from the Castle Falls Police Department was parked across the street, responding to my break-in report. Chad's BMW was still in my driveway, and through my living room window, I could see him pacing back and forth, talking animatedly on his phone. He had no idea his world was about to collapse. Victoria emerged from her Mercedes like an avenging angel, tall, elegant, and radiating the kind of cold fury that only came from discovering a profound betrayal. She wore a tailored business suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and she moved with the confidence of someone who'd never had to doubt her place in the world. Until now. I met her at the end of my driveway. He's inside. Been there for about an hour. Is your wife home? Not yet. She's at the studio until 6. Victoria checked her watch. Good. I want to deal with Chad first. We walked up to my front door together. I used my key to enter, making plenty of noise so Chad would know someone was coming. I wanted him to have a moment to panic before he saw who it was. Chad, I called out. That you in there? He appeared in the living room doorway, trying to look casual but failing miserably. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair was messed up, and he had the guilty expression of a man caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Ben, Amelia asked me to pick up some papers for the expansion project. Hope you don't mind. Not at all, I said pleasantly. I brought someone to meet you. Victoria stepped into view, and I watched Chad's face go through about 5 different emotions in the space of 2 seconds. Surprise, recognition, fear, calculation, and finally, desperate charm. Victoria, what are you doing here? I thought you were in Boston. I was, until I discovered that my fiancé has been lying to me for weeks. Her voice was ice cold, each word precisely enunciated. Portland, Chad? Really? A hotel development project that doesn't exist? Chad's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I can explain. Please do. Explain why you told me you were in Portland while you've actually been in Castle Falls. Explain why you've been spending weeks in this man's house while I've been planning our wedding. Explain why Foster Investment Group has no business license, no corporate registration, and no legitimate address. The color drained from Chad's face. Victoria had done her homework, probably with the help of expensive lawyers and private investigators. She knew everything. Victoria, you don't understand. This is a legitimate business opportunity. With a married woman whose husband had no idea you existed until this week? Chad shot me a look of pure hatred. He'd figured out that I was the source of Victoria's information, and he didn't like being outmaneuvered. Ben, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I interrupted. You've been screwing my wife and planning to steal her money. The only question is whether she's your partner or your victim. That's not true. Victoria stepped forward, and even though she was a foot shorter than Chad, she somehow seemed to tower over him. Show me your phone. What? Your phone, Chad. If this is just a business relationship, you won't mind showing me your text messages with Mrs. Carter. Chad's hand moved instinctively toward his pocket, then stopped. Victoria, this is ridiculous. You're letting jealousy cloud your judgment. My judgment is perfectly clear. You're a con man, Chad. You've been running the same scam for years. Find lonely women with successful businesses, seduce them, steal their money, and disappear. The only difference this time is that you got caught. You don't know what you're talking about. Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out a thick folder. Hartford, 2019. Miranda Walsh, owner of 3 yoga studios. You convinced her to invest in a fake expansion project and disappeared with $200,000. Providence, 2020. Sarah Chen, boutique fitness chain, same pattern, same result. Springfield, 2021. Jennifer Martinez, personal training business. Should I continue? Chad stared at the folder like it was a poisonous snake. How did you? I hired investigators, Chad. Real ones. The kind who know how to track financial records and interview victims. Did you really think I'd marry someone without doing my due diligence? The room fell silent, except for the sound of Chad's heavy breathing. He was trapped, and he knew it. His carefully constructed facade was crumbling, and there was nowhere left to run. That's when Amelia walked through the front door. Ben, why is there a police car outside? She stopped dead when she saw the 3 of us standing in our living room like actors in some surreal play. Amelia, Chad said desperately, thank God you're here. These people are making crazy accusations. You must be Mrs. Carter, Victoria said smoothly. I'm Victoria Ashworth, Chad's fiancée. The word hit Amelia like a physical blow. She actually staggered backward, her face going white. Fiancé? Engaged for 18 months. Our wedding is planned for September. Victoria's voice was calm, professional, like she was discussing a business transaction. Although I suspect we'll need to make some changes to those plans. Amelia looked back and forth between Chad and Victoria, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Finally, she found her voice. Chad, what is she talking about? It's complicated, Amelia. Victoria and we have a history, but it's not what you think. Not what I think? Amelia's voice was rising. You told me you were single. You said you'd never found anyone worth settling down with. I never said I was single. You absolutely did. She turned to Victoria. How long have you been engaged? 18 months, as I mentioned. We've been together for 3 years. Victoria reached into her purse again and pulled out her phone. Would you like to see the engagement photos? Or perhaps the wedding venue contract? Amelia looked like she was about to be sick. Chad, tell me this isn't true. But Chad had given up on charm and moved on to damage control. Amelia, listen to me. What Victoria and I have, it's not real. It's a business arrangement. Her family has money, connections. But what you and I have is different. Business arrangement? Victoria's composure finally cracked, and real emotion showed through. Is that what you call 3 years of my life? Planning a future together? Introducing you to my family? Victoria, please. No, Chad. I'm done with your lies. She turned to Amelia. Mrs. Carter, I'm truly sorry you got caught up in this. But you should know that Chad has done this before, multiple times. He targets successful women, makes them feel special, and then disappears with their money. Amelia was staring at Chad like she'd never seen him before. Is that true? Of course not. Victoria's jealous. She's trying to sabotage what we have. Then show me your phone, Amelia said quietly. What? Show me your phone. If you have nothing to hide, show me your text messages with Victoria. Chad's face went through the same calculation I'd seen when Victoria made the same demand. He was caught between two women who both had the power to destroy him, and he was running out of lies. That's when Officer Kelly knocked on the door. Police! Mr. Carter, you reported a break-in? I opened the door to find Officer Kelly looking slightly confused by the crowd of expensive cars in my driveway. Hi, Mike. Thanks for coming. This is the guy who was in my house without permission. Chad started to protest, but Victoria cut him off. Officer, this man has been conducting fraudulent business activities. I have documentation if you'd like to see it. Now wait just a minute, Chad began. And I have evidence that he's been using my house for personal activities without my knowledge or consent, I added. Officer Kelly looked around the room, taking in the tension and obvious conflict. Okay, everyone calm down. Let's sort this out one thing at a time. What followed was the most satisfying hour of my life. Victoria presented her evidence of Chad's previous cons with the efficiency of a prosecutor. I showed Officer Kelly the surveillance footage of Chad entering my house and going through my workshop. Amelia sat in stunned silence as the full scope of Chad's deception became clear. By the end of it, Chad was facing potential charges for trespassing, fraud, and identity theft. His engagement was over, his con game was exposed, and his reputation in Castle Falls was destroyed beyond repair. But the best part came when Officer Kelly asked if anyone wanted to press charges. I do, Victoria said immediately. So do I added. All eyes turned to Amelia. She looked at Chad one last time, her face a mixture of hurt, anger, and disgust. Yes, she said quietly. I want to press charges too. Chad was arrested on the spot, handcuffed in my living room, while Mrs. Granger and half the neighborhood watched from their windows. As Officer Kelly led him away, Chad shot me one final look of pure hatred. "This isn't over, Carter," he snarled. "Yes, it is," I replied calmly. "It's been over since the day you decided to mess with my family." After the police car disappeared down the street, Victoria, Amelia, and I stood in my driveway in awkward silence. The immediate crisis was over, but the aftermath was just beginning. "Mrs. Carter," Victoria said finally, "I want you to know that I don't blame you for what happened. Chad is very good at what he does. He's fooled a lot of intelligent women." Amelia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea he was engaged. I never would have—" "I know," Victoria said gently. "But you should also know that he was planning to disappear with your money within the next few weeks. I found plane tickets to Mexico in his apartment, along with documents showing he'd been siphoning funds from your business accounts." The final blow. Not only had Chad been using Amelia for sex, he'd been planning to rob her blind and disappear. Everything about their relationship had been a lie. Victoria got back in her Mercedes and drove away, leaving Amelia and me alone in our driveway. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across our lawn, and I could hear the distant sound of dinner being prepared in neighboring houses. Normal life, continuing despite the drama that had just unfolded. "Ben," Amelia said quietly, "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." "Yes, I do." She wiped her eyes and looked at me directly. "I betrayed you. I betrayed our marriage. And I was stupid enough to fall for a con man's lies." "You were lonely," I said. "He took advantage of that." "That's not an excuse." "No, it's not. But it's an explanation." We stood there for a long moment, 20 years of marriage hanging in the balance. I could see her waiting for me to tell her it was okay, that we could work through this, that love would conquer all. But I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. "I need some time," I said finally. She nodded, understanding. "I'll stay at Lila's tonight. Give you space to think." As she packed a bag and prepared to leave, I realized that my revenge was complete. Chad was destroyed, his con was exposed, and everyone in Castle Falls would know the truth by morning. Amelia was humiliated, her affair revealed, her judgment questioned. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. The house was quiet after she left, quieter than it had been in years. I sat in my kitchen, drinking a beer and thinking about what came next. The marriage might be over, but the story wasn't finished yet. Because in a small town like Castle Falls, scandals had a way of taking on a life of their own. And I was about to learn that revenge was a double-edged sword that could cut both ways. The next morning, Castle Falls buzzed with gossip like a hive of angry bees. By the time I made it to the Crooked Nail for my usual Friday afternoon beer, the story had been told and retold so many times that it barely resembled what had actually happened. According to the local rumor mill, I'd caught my wife and her lover in bed, beaten the man senseless, and had him arrested for assault. Amelia was either a helpless victim or a scheming accomplice, depending on who was telling the story. Chad was either a dangerous criminal or a misunderstood businessman who'd been framed by a jealous husband. None of it was true, but truth had never been the point of small-town gossip. Tommy the bartender slid a beer across the bar without being asked. "Hell of a thing, Ben. You holding up okay?" "I'm fine, Tommy. Thanks." "Takes a lot of guts to do what you did. Most guys would have just looked the other way." I was about to respond when the bar door opened and Doug walked in, followed by 3 other guys from our construction crew. They'd clearly come to show support, which I appreciated, but their presence also meant that my personal business was now public entertainment. "Ben!" Doug clapped me on the shoulder. "Heard you gave that city boy what he deserved." "I didn't give him anything he didn't earn himself." "Still, takes balls to stand up to a guy like that. Rich, connected, probably had lawyers on speed dial." The conversation continued like that for the next hour, my friends and co-workers treating me like some kind of hero for exposing Chad's con game. It should have felt good, but something was bothering me. The story they were telling wasn't the story I'd lived. In their version, I was the wronged husband who'd fought back against a predator. In reality, I'd been planning and manipulating for weeks, using surveillance equipment and private investigators to destroy two people's lives. The distinction mattered, even if no one else seemed to notice. Around 6 o'clock, the bar door opened again, and Lila Green walked in. Amelia's best friend looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup was smeared, and her hands were shaking. The bar went quiet as she spotted me and walked over. "Ben, I need to talk to you." "Go ahead." "Privately." I followed her to a corner booth, aware that everyone in the place was watching us. Lila had been Amelia's confidant and enabler for years, always encouraging her to follow her heart and live her truth. I had no idea what she wanted now. "Amelia's a mess," she said without preamble. "She's been crying for 12 hours straight. She can't eat, can't sleep, can't even think straight." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you planned this whole thing. The surveillance, the investigation, bringing in that woman from Boston. You orchestrated Amelia's humiliation like some kind of puppet master." I leaned back in my seat, studying Lila's face. "Are you suggesting I should have just ignored my wife's affair?" "I'm suggesting you could have handled it differently. Talked to her, gone to counseling, tried to save your marriage instead of destroying it." "She asked for an open marriage, Lila. She was already planning to leave me for Chad. I just made sure everyone knew what kind of man he really was." "You made sure everyone knew what kind of woman she was, too. Do you have any idea what people are saying about her? About both of you?" I did know, and I was starting to realize that my victory might be more costly than I'd anticipated. In a small town, reputation was everything. Amelia's business depended on her image as a successful, trustworthy professional. If that image was destroyed, her livelihood would be destroyed along with it. "What do you want me to do, Lila?" "I want you to tell people the truth, that Chad manipulated her, that she was a victim, not a villain." "Was she? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like she made a choice to betray our marriage. Chad might have lied to her about being single, but she knew she was married." Lila's face crumpled. "She loves you, Ben. She's always loved you. She just got confused, made some bad decisions. But she never wanted to hurt you." "Then why did she?" The question hung in the air between us. Lila didn't have an answer because there wasn't a good one. Amelia had chosen excitement over stability, lies over truth, and now she was facing the consequences. But as I sat there looking at Lila's tear-streaked face, I realized that consequences had a way of spreading beyond their intended targets. Amelia's humiliation was affecting her friends, her employees, her clients. My revenge was creating collateral damage I hadn't considered. "I'll think about it," I said finally. Lila nodded and left, but her words stayed with me for the rest of the evening. Had I gone too far? Was I the hero of this story, or had I become the villain? Saturday morning brought an unexpected visitor. Victoria Ashworth stood on my doorstep at 8 a.m., looking as elegant as ever despite the early hour. "Mr. Carter, I hope I'm not disturbing you. I wanted to speak with you before I returned to Boston." I invited her in and made coffee while she settled herself at my kitchen table. In the morning light, she looked older than I'd initially thought, probably mid-40s, with the kind of refined beauty that came from good genes and expensive maintenance. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for calling me, for providing evidence, for helping me see Chad for what he really is. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe, but probably not before he'd stolen more money from your wife and disappeared. You saved me from making a terrible mistake." We drank our coffee in comfortable silence for a few minutes before she spoke again. "I also wanted to apologize." "For what?" "For what this has cost your marriage. I know my involvement made things worse between you and your wife. If I'd handled things differently, Perhaps you two could have worked through this privately. It was an interesting perspective. Victoria was suggesting that my marriage might have been salvageable if I hadn't involved her in my revenge plot. The thought had occurred to me too, especially after my conversation with Lila. Amelia made her choices, I said. I just made sure there were consequences. Yes, but consequences for whom? Chad deserved what happened to him. He's a predator who's been running cons for years. But your wife, she was a victim too, wasn't she? The question I'd been avoiding for days. Was Amelia a victim or a perpetrator? Had she been manipulated by a professional con man, or had she willingly participated in betraying our marriage? The answer was probably both. I don't know anymore, I admitted. Victoria reached across the table and touched my hand. For what it's worth, I think she genuinely cared about you. When she realized Chad was engaged, she looked heartbroken. Not just because she'd been lied to, but because she'd hurt you. Too little, too late. Perhaps. But people make mistakes, Mr. Carter. Even good people sometimes make terrible decisions. The question is whether those mistakes define them, or whether they're given a chance to make things right. After Victoria left, I spent the day working in my shop, trying to process everything that had happened. My marriage was probably over, Chad was facing criminal charges, and Amelia's reputation was in ruins. I'd gotten everything I wanted, so why didn't I feel satisfied? Sunday afternoon brought the answer in the form of Mrs. Granger, who knocked on my door with another plate of terrible cookies and a concerned expression. Ben, dear, I hope you don't mind me asking, but how are you holding up? I'm fine, Mrs. Granger. Thank you for asking. It's just that people are talking, and some of the things they're saying, well, they're not very kind. I invited her in, curious about what the neighborhood gossips were saying now. It's about the surveillance equipment, she said delicately. Some people are wondering how long you'd been watching the house, recording conversations. They're asking whether you violated Amelia's privacy. My blood ran cold. I'd been so focused on gathering evidence against Chad that I hadn't considered how my methods might be perceived. In the eyes of some people, I wasn't the wronged husband who'd exposed a con man. I was the controlling husband who'd been spying on his wife. What are they saying exactly? That you'd been planning this for months. That you set up cameras throughout the house without telling Amelia. That you recorded intimate moments and used them to humiliate her. None of that was true, but it didn't matter. In the court of public opinion, perception was reality. And the perception was shifting from me as the hero to me as the villain. Mrs. Granger, I only installed those cameras after I suspected the affair, and I never recorded anything inappropriate. I know, dear, I know, but people love to talk, and the truth has a way of getting twisted. She patted my hand sympathetically. I just thought you should know what's being said. After she left, I sat in my living room and faced the truth I'd been avoiding. My revenge had been too complete, too devastating. I'd destroyed Chad and humiliated Amelia so thoroughly that people were starting to question my motives and methods. In trying to be the hero of my own story, I'd risked becoming the villain. Monday morning, I made a decision that surprised even me. I drove to Lila's house, where Amelia had been staying, and knocked on the door. Amelia answered, looking like a ghost of her former self. Her eyes were red from crying, her hair was unwashed, and she was wearing the same clothes she'd had on Friday night. Ben, what are you doing here? We need to talk. We sat in Lila's living room, the awkwardness between us so thick you could cut it with a knife. This was the woman I'd loved for 20 years, the woman I'd built a life with, and now we were like strangers trying to navigate a minefield. I'm sorry, she said before I could speak. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. For the affair, for the lies, for asking for an open marriage instead of just being honest about what was happening. Why, Amelia? Why did you do it? She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. I felt invisible. like I was just going through the motions of being alive. The business was successful, our marriage was stable, everything looked perfect from the outside, but I felt empty. So you decided to have an affair. I decided to feel something again. Chad made me feel interesting, desirable, important. He talked about expanding the business, traveling together, building something bigger than what I had. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I know how stupid that sounds now. It sounds human. She blinked in surprise. What? It sounds human, Amelia. Stupid and selfish and destructive, but human. People make mistakes when they're unhappy. Are you saying you forgive me? I thought about that question for a long time. Did I forgive her? Could I forgive her? Did forgiveness even matter at this point? I'm saying I understand why you did it. That doesn't make it okay, and it doesn't mean we can go back to the way things were. But I understand. We talked for another hour, both of us trying to make sense of what had happened and what came next. By the end of it, we'd reached an understanding, if not a reconciliation. Amelia would return to our house and we'd try to rebuild some kind of relationship, maybe not as husband and wife, but as two people who'd shared 20 years and still cared about each other. She'd work to repair the damage to her business and her reputation, and I'd stop feeding the gossip mill that was destroying both of us. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was something better than the bitter hatred that had been consuming both of us. That evening, as we sat in our kitchen sharing a quiet dinner, I realized that revenge had taught me something important about myself. I was capable of planning and executing a complex scheme to destroy my enemies. I was capable of manipulation, surveillance, and calculated cruelty, but I was also capable of mercy. And in the end, mercy felt more like victory than revenge ever had. 6 months later, Chad Foster pleaded guilty to fraud and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Victoria Ashworth sent me a thank you card and a generous donation to the local food bank. Amelia and I filed for divorce but remained friends and business partners. I helped her renovate the studio, and she helped me expand my construction business. The gossips of Castle Falls eventually found new scandals to discuss, and our story became just another cautionary tale about the dangers of taking your marriage for granted. But late at night, when the house was quiet and I was alone with my thoughts, I remembered the feeling of perfect, calculated revenge. The satisfaction of watching my enemies destroy themselves with their own lies and betrayals. It had been intoxicating. And that scared me more than anything else that had happened, because the house always wins, but sometimes the price of victory is higher than you're willing to pay.